You're live.
Okay. Hi, folks. This is Pastor David Grisham with For God and Country on YouTube again. And today I wanted to talk about something that is very important and it's going to have a big impact on Christians. I alluded to it a little bit on a video that we did the other day that I uploaded to YouTube, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on this one subject, and that is when the devil switches justice for injustice. Part of what the devil does when he switches evil for good and good for evil is switching justice for injustice, because justice is good and injustice is evil. So he's swapping the two around. And I want to give you a couple of examples in the news today. One is the Kyle Rittenhouse case. The Kyle Rittenhouse case, this young man went to Kenosha riots and everything that was going on. And of course, nobody seems to be concerned with the fact that the left-wing idiots were burning Kenosha to the ground and the police were standing by and doing nothing, and they were just letting it happen. No one wants to talk about that, of course. That's a whole different subject, although it does apply to this. And Kyle Rittenhouse is a young man, 18-year-old young man, seems to be a good and decent person at heart. And he went there with an AR-15 rifle to protect himself, but he did not use it aggressively. He did not go there with the intent to threaten people with the rifle. He actually used a fire extinguisher more than he did the rifle, because as they were setting fires, he was putting them out. And so this is what angered the leftists. And three men, all three were convicted felons, all three of them were, chased him along with a lot of other people and attacked him. And two of them were killed when he shot them, and one of them was wounded. And one of them just the other day, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, he had to admit on the stand that he was in fact pointing his weapon. He had a handgun, which he was not supposed to have as a convicted felon, pointing it at Kyle Rittenhouse when Kyle Rittenhouse shot and blew off his bicep on his right arm. And but they're trying to take this case of self-defense because he's being pursued. Mind you, Kyle Rittenhouse is being chased by people. He's trying to get away. He's trying to get away from these people, but they're trying to block him in. They're screaming, "Get him, crush his skull, kill him," and they're screaming things. So he's in danger, fear for his life, and he defends himself. And the prosecution, because of the political nature of the events surrounding the riots, is trying to take this case of self-defense and turn it into murder. Now, let's take the case of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which is in the news today. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar apparently got into an altercation, an argument with his neighbor. He's a 60-year-old man. This guy is older and smaller than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a junior. It's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's son. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's son, pardon me for that mistake, got into this altercation. He is a very large man. He's extremely big because his father is a very big man. Got into a fight or argument with a 60-year-old man, and over this altercation, stabbed him. And the man had to go to the hospital. He almost bled to death outside the emergency room doors, fell and cracked his skull. So he got a skull fracture and he nearly bled to death out of this. It almost killed this man because he was stabbed by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's son.
Did you say multiple times?
Multiple times. He was stabbed multiple times. So what does Kareem Abdul-Jabbar get from this? Even though this is obviously a case of attempted murder, he gets 6 months in jail. A slap on the wrist. 6 months in jail for deliberately stabbing someone smaller and older and weaker than him with a weapon.
Multiple times.
Multiple times. And the judge is even giving him until January the 7th to start his sentence so he can apply for home confinement, so he doesn't even actually have to go to jail. So I guess he can stay at home in his mansion and live in the lap of luxury and watch Netflix all day as punishment
for nearly killing
a 60-year-old man by stabbing him repeatedly. And and he ended up with a fractured skull and almost dying. So this is the kind of thing that happens when a nation leaves God. When a nation gets away from God, then you see this reversal of justice. I'll give you another example. The January 6th riot was called an insurrection. Oh my goodness, because people broke into the Capitol building and stole a podium. And they broke into the Capitol building and wandered around taking selfies of themselves.
Worse than 9/11.
Worse than 9/11. Absolutely worse than 9/11. The worst thing that ever happened in American history was the Democrat Congress being invaded by a bunch of Trump supporters who were probably led by a bunch of left-wing activists who were trying to incite this. That's a different subject. But this is the worst thing since 9/11. Meanwhile, Antifa in Kenosha burns down half the city, burns down half of Minneapolis, repeatedly attacks a federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon, over and over and over 100 nights. They repeatedly attack this courthouse, and this is not an insurrection. And do you see people going to prison for these things? Do you see it televised? You see people in jail for months at a time being put in solitary confinement in deplorable conditions, like what's happened with the January 6th insurrectionists? Because politics is the god of a humanistic society. When you turn government into God, then attacking government then becomes the greatest sin in the nation. Okay? That's what's happening. When you attack the government, when you attack the powers that be, those that control the purse strings, all that controls the political direction of the country, they become gods in their own minds, and to go against them is absolute idolatry.
That's why the government is trying to take away our rights at self-defense.
Yes, they're trying to take away our rights to self-defense. That's what this is an attack on. Basically what they're going to do is they're going to try to take away your right to self-defense. Then they're going to try to take away your guns, your means of self-defense. So once they flip the script on the justice system, and they've taken away your rights to use a gun to defend yourself, then you're going to see that a gun is mostly useless anyway in today's society, and then the government's going to take away your guns because they're pretty much useless anyway. You can't use them to defend yourself. So that's what they're going to do. Now, if the leftists use them, oh my goodness, that's going to be okay. You see, the young man who got his bicep blown off in the Kyle Rittenhouse case should have been tried, number one, as a felon in possession of a firearm. Number two, he should have been tried for attempted murder because he chased Kyle Rittenhouse down and attempted to shoot him at point blank range, even though Kyle Rittenhouse had not threatened this man in any way and had not fired any shots at him. He was attempting to murder him while he was down on the ground. He approached him and raised his gun and pointed it at him, and he gets shot, and where Kyle Rittenhouse shot him in self-defense. So Kyle Rittenhouse is on trial for attempted murder for this man, rather than the other man on trial
The
for
felon,
attempted murder.
the convicted felon is not on trial.
Yeah, the convicted felon is not on trial for possessing a firearm, which he wasn't supposed to have, and he's not on trial for attempting to murder Kyle Rittenhouse. No, Kyle Rittenhouse is on trial for attempting to murder him, you see? And so, anyway, this is how the devil flips things around. It gets politics
Good for evil and evil for good.
involved into the justice system and flips it around for injustice. Now, Christians, what does this mean for you? Let me tell you. Here's one way you can fight against this. And the powers that be will have no control over this. It's called jury nullification. Let me explain what that is for you. Jury nullification is when you get on a jury and you decide not only on the facts of the case, but you decide on the law itself. If you believe there's an injustice being done here, that this person shouldn't even be on trial, that the reason they're on trial is for some unconstitutional law, you have the right as a juror to make a decision not only based on the facts of the case as it pertains to the law and judge the facts of the case, you have the right to judge the law itself. and the prosecution itself. And all it takes is one Christian on that jury. And if you've got another brother in Christ who's being persecuted for trumped up charges, and they're trying to do what they're trying to do to Kyle Rittenhouse today, it just takes one juror on that jury to hang that jury, and that injustice does not happen. That man does not go to prison because one jurist on that jury decides, I'm not going to convict. It takes a unanimous decision to convict anyone on that jury. So what Christians can do is they can stop shirking their responsibilities for getting on a jury, and they can enforce jury nullification. This used to be practiced during the days of slavery, when Christians would get on jury trials, and they would say, we're not gonna prosecute this man because he returned a slave, which he refused to return a slave, which was contrary to the law, because in 1850 Congress passed a slave act in which you had to return a runaway slave even if they were in a free state. So a lot of Christians came out of the woodwork and got on juries, and they refused to convict people under this unconstitutional and unjust law. We need to go back to doing that. We need to do that today. We need to remind ourselves of our history with jury nullification. And we Christians, when we get on a jury, if somebody's being tried for a trumped up charge, we need to make sure they do not get convicted. That's what you can do directly, Christians. And I want to remind you of this so you don't forget. So God bless you all, and you have a good day.
Pray and stand.
Pray and stand.